HCOG board and convene as the the Policy Advisory Committee. Just for those not aware, the PAC convenes to include representation from Caltrans and HTA for items specific to transportation. Next on the agenda is public participation. This agenda item is reserved for matters not on the agenda. Any public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board. And item number 4 is the meeting record of September 19th. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we pass the meeting record of that evening.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion of that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. That brings us to probably one of the more significant parts of our meeting today, which is a public hearing to receive comments on the unmet transit needs. And so with that, I will open the public hearing on unmet transit needs and invite staff to fill us in on where we are on that.
Yes, Philip Johnson will give a brief report on the process, and then we can hear from the public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a brief reminder about how this process works. We open the comment period, lasts for approximately 1.5 months. We also go out to the public. We go to all of the city council meetings, also the county of Humboldt. We also went out to the McMac this year. We gather all of those comments. They are then analyzed by the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council at HCOG, and they look at the comments and determine if they are unmet needs, and then most importantly, if they are reasonable to meet. And in the reasonable to meet process, they look at the definitions that HCOG has, and analysis is done internally by HCOG staff, and we also work with other operators to try to come to that determination if they are in fact reasonable to meet. Some updates on how this process has changed the transit system and improved the transit system over the years. An update on last year's findings. Blue Lake Saturday service. The Willow Creek route was driving by and still is driving by Blue Lake without stopping. And they will be stopping, or they started stopping there on October 12th on Saturdays. And we will see how that participation works out. Southwest Eureka, there was also an unmet need finding reasonable to meet last year. For a stop in Southwest Eureka near Pearson's, there's a large swath of commercial and lodging that does not have a bus stop for a long length of miles on the 101. And it's about half a mile on the 101 corridor there, and that was found reasonable to meet. That was shelved until funding becomes available for implementing that unmet transit need. The RTS late night weekday service, that will be starting on July 2020 through the LCTOP, the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program. Funding will be kickstarting that in July 2020. The Old Arcata Road, we still, as everybody knows, we still have low participation with that. However, it's great that it is meeting that need and that there is no continuing overhead in providing that service. It's based upon performance and actual usage, so it's not costing anything to continue the service. Tishnan has officially shut down and discontinued as of June 28th, 2019, and that was due to the low fare box performance that it had. And to remind the board, we have a new tool at our disposal called T-Best that we use to estimate ridership, that also provides the cost breakdown so that we can have a data-based approach to estimating ridership using socioeconomic and population data So we will be using that tool in this year's unmet need process to help determine if the comments are reasonable to meet. And that concludes my presentation here. And if there are any questions, we will be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Philip. Anybody? No, it's okay if I say Adeline.
One of my constituents came up with the idea of not charging a fare to ride the bus. She also went further and even suggested that trains could be free and that kind of thing. Have we ever done any kind of study on having a fare-free bus system?
I can help answer that. Una Smith, our senior planner, has certainly had this idea in the past, and she has been attending some meetings. There was a meeting scheduled for last Monday with Supervisor Wilson and some other people. That meeting didn't happen because of the timing of it, so we will continue that discussion. I just saw an article today that there are some areas in the world and a few in the United States, from rural to large, that do not charge a fee for transit. So the key is finding enough money that you would anticipate getting from the fares. Certainly the LCTOP program could help with that. The problem is that there's a timeline on those funds. So you can only implement something for 5 years, I think, and Philip might correct me on that. It's not an ongoing funding source for that. So that is something that we are looking into. We don't have a solution yet, but it could be requesting that all the cities contribute funding. And if we need to do a study with a consultant, we can certainly look into that in our next year's overall work program. But we'll see how these meetings are going with Una. And I am hoping that we can move forward with it. I'll just say that the one statistic that I saw in an article today is that ridership went up 37% once the bus became free to ride.
So, no, thank you, Director Jones. You have another, just some food for thought? Okay.
Hi,
I will,
Estelle.
ask
You know, I have,
Councilmember Patino from the HTA to
I
talk.
have a
about-
question on the
Can you
Willow
put the
Creek.
microphone up a little bit?
Yeah, I have a question on that Willow Creek stop to Blue Lake. It says Saturday. What time and both directions, I'm assuming?
They are stopping in both directions, and the timetable has not been released by or updated on HTA's website yet. But looking at the Valley West stop, it will be stopping in Blue Lake about 15 minutes prior to the Valley West stop.
And where does it stop?
It is at the City Hall in downtown Blue Lake.
Okay,
It is not at the Rancheria.
great, thank you.
My question for you, Paul, is, and that's kind of putting you on the spot, so just if you
Sure.
give a ballpark figure. Looking at the rural areas, it's very difficult to meet the fare bucks requirement, right? But do you have
Well,
more
Blue-
use in the cities, and is that
Oh,
why-
yeah, of course.
So that's really what keeps HTA in funding.
Right, but it's, Willow Creek has been functioning pretty well around the 10% that is required.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I
And then they,
understand, but,
of course, they lowered ours for ETS and AMRTS.
Yeah.
We're at 10% now, too. We used to be 25.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
I can speak for Soham also, they're
Right.
keeping it okay, but just in response to Director Jones's question, how realistic is it to run the HTA without?
I think if you look at how much money you have to come up with, you have to come up with 10% in order to run, right? 10% of the operating costs.
Mm-hmm.
If that 10% can come from somewhere else, it doesn't matter whether they're paying or not.
Well, I'll
That's
just add to
not it.
that.
Is
So
that not true?
for RTS, currently, I think it's around 40%. So it was
That
around
we- yeah.
it was around 40% of the total cost of the operation was paid for by fares. The
Right.
law now states that you only need 10.
Right.
But if the fares were free, that other 30% has to
That's
come
right.
from somewhere. So that would
Exactly.
be
Yeah.
on the city. more than likely to come up with that balance
Sure,
of the
sure.
funding. I do also want to add things I've heard at meetings in Sacramento, that the legislature is really looking at the Transportation Development Act. There's a working group that has been meeting. We have 2 rural representatives on it, one from Nevada County, and I can't remember what other rural county. From what I hear, they are looking at getting rid of fare box altogether. Their question is, then what do you replace it with? You have to have some kind of a performance measure. So we expect to see changes through the legislature next year. And as soon as I hear more back from our rural counties, I will keep you all up to date on it.
Yeah, great.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Director Seaman.
So this is just, I'm thinking about what Director Jones was asking too, as we're looking at things like parking management and how we get funding for parking, and as that becomes a bigger issue, perhaps that's a way for cities to look at justify investing in transportation, especially if we can utilize that. We can have fewer people driving into town and parking. Not saying, I'm just talking out loud, but that to me makes sense, that parking management that we're going to be looking at really soon will tie in closely to need for public transportation. I have a second question. It's totally different though, so go ahead.
Oh, just one additional thing. If you remember back, we were asked for a priority list for projects for Representative Huffman to use in the negotiations with the federal transportation bill. I did add that a good benefit for rural areas, not necessarily urban, but our county, would be free transit. I'm not sure if he's going to pick up on that or if it'll go anywhere, but it's in his ear.
Great. Thank you, Marcella.
So my second question, which is totally different, I know that when you get these requests from your public hearing for what the needs are, I heard one this morning, but it's a bit of a chicken and an egg thing at the Humboldt County Library, is that they can't offer programming because there's no bus that comes close enough. So like after school, kids can't come do homework. It's just an awkward thing. And is it possible to get the bus closer? But if you did a needs assessment, you might not show that people need to come. But if we offered the programming, people may need to come. So I just don't know how you take that into account. So I guess I'm offering that as both a comment as well as a question in there. So.
Thank you. We will look at that comment this cycle and get back to you with an answer.
Yeah, I'll just add that often, relocating a bus stop or a bus shelter, that doesn't qualify as a need because it's something that the operators can look at and say, well, yeah, we can do that. So that is something we are, as Philip said, we're really going to involve the operators with this. And, there could be an easy solution. So that'll be part of our work.
Yeah, Susan, if you will talk to Natalie and have her bring it up to HTA.
I was already planning on that, and then
Good.
I saw it was on the agenda here too, and I was like, oh, I might as well bring it up.
Yeah, if you bring it up to her, then we can hack it out there. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to recognize what does and does not qualify as an unmet need. Moving a bus stop, those things do not come into, that's in HCA's bailiwick. I do want to mention for the record, and I told Marcella this already before the meeting, that I did get one comment from Southern Humboldt, and this was from the Healy Senior Center. They were looking at the potential for revitalizing the Quail, which was basically a private setup and was aided by HCOG, but also by private donations. So during our meeting at the Board of Supervisors yesterday, Director Mattson explained that if something viable were to come forward, it could be looked at, but just to put that in there, that is that service for the seniors at the Healy Senior Center for going to medical appointments, shopping, that kind of thing still exists. Well, we tried to address it through the HTA with a local service, which really wasn't utilized, even though we had meetings. We tried to direct it towards their lunch hours and everything, but it just didn't seem to work for them. And I'll just mention one I guess, complaint that came from somebody who was elderly, who wanted to come shopping up in Eureka, was that by the time they got to the mall, went to one or two shops, they had to turn around and go back again, or they were going to not be able to make it home. So it's a little bit of an ask, an assumption that they might be able to make it. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'd like to go to the public, if there's any public comment on unmet transportation needs. Welcome Supervisor Madrone.
Thank you, Supervisor Fennell. And good afternoon, board members. I'm here to speak for unmet needs in the county. We had a nice, robust discussion at the board the other day. And in particular, I wanted to point out the unmet needs in McKinleyville, third largest city or non-city in Humboldt County. And the current transit simply doesn't serve the community well, and it doesn't really even serve the transit needs very well. Because the bus coming south from Trinidad, it goes into McKinleyville, wanders around for 45 minutes before it continues on to Arcata or Eureka. So if you're a commuter, you're trying to get to Arcata or Eureka, it really doesn't work. In addition, if you put your bike on in the morning in Trinidad, and you think you're going to get your bike back on in Eureka or Arcata on the way back home, it doesn't happen because the bus is overcrowded with bikes and stuff. Sometimes they're in the aisles. And I appreciate the work that's been done to provide that access with the bike racks and things like that. But additionally, it really doesn't go around McKinleyville very well. It hits a few spots, mainly along Central. And so we've been meeting in the community. We had a robust turnout at the McKinleyville Advisory Committee meeting last month with, I think it was, 15, 20 members of the public showed up to comment. And they were asking to see if we could put together a inner city bus system in McKinleyville that might follow a route, Central Avenue, Murray, down McKinleyville Avenue and back on School Road, which would basically put almost everybody in the center of McKinleyville within a mile. And I know that's still a little bit of a distance, but it's better than what's happening right now, which in many cases is about 2 miles for many people to get to the bus stop. So we think that by doing that, we could actually reduce the number of stops that the transit system currently does. And it could be more like the way Arcata works in Eureka, where the transit hits just a couple stops, but then you have the inner city bus that's operating that really provides that service for the community. I've met with Marcella and her staff as well as HTA a bit on this. There was some estimates done that we might be able to do something like this for about $250,000. I believe that this year there's almost 400,000, maybe a little bit more, of unutilized transit funds that are going to roads. And while I want to see the county get a whole lot more money for roads, I've spoken with Director of Public Works Tom Madsen, and he agrees this money needs to go to transit if there are unmet needs. And I think this need in McKinleyville is very significant. And by having that intercity route, it would actually help Trinidad and spots north in that having a true commuter system to get into Arcata or Eureka. So it would actually benefit in both directions. And you know, with Tishnan going down last year, that freed up 150, 180,000. And I think there was another 250 or so out there. So there's over $400,000 this year that didn't get spent on transit. So I'm just here to speak for transit in McKinleyville in particular. The Willow Creek area would like to see more runs on the system that goes up to Witchpeck in that area. And I know in southern Humboldt we'd like to see some more returns on runs there too. But I really am mainly here to speak strongly for McKinleyville and North County. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Seeing no other public comment, I'll bring it back to the board, and I'd ask staff to respond to Supervisor Madrone's comment.
The first thing I want to make very clear is you don't have to have an unmet need if your jurisdiction has funds that you use on streets and roads. You can implement any transit program or anything to do with transit without having an unmet need made by this board as being reasonable to meet. So that is really important to know. And then the other thing is that Colin Frisk from the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities He's a really great partner to work with. And he found a funding opportunity to do a transit study. It's with the Western Transportation Institute at Montana State University. We are hoping that we can do a transit study for McKinleyville next year. There is a local match requirement that more than likely will look at the county to fund, but that's also in the works, to look at the possibility of McKinleyville's own service. I mean, other alternatives are working with Arcata to expand that service, or mobility on demand, or a share vehicle that could be used to get people to the main line. So there are a lot of things to look at. Just wanted to let you know that's all going to happen next year, I hope.
Great, thank you. Any further comment?
Still.
Director Patino?
Yeah, you know, I've thought for a while about McKinleyville and not having local service. And right across the river, we have AMRTS that runs around Arcata all day, you know, 6 days a week. And it seemed to me that there's a couple of things. Number one, where does the money come from? McKinleyville's county, so money comes from the county. That $400,000 there, so it wouldn't cost Arcata, AMRTS, any money. As soon as we cross the river, we're paid by the county. So to me, a simple solution, simple in my mind, over the next year or so is to have Arcata, instead of doing their circular loops around Arcata, to cut into an ellipse and go across, up Central, down McKinleyville Avenue, and back through Arcata. There's a significant number of students that live in McKinleyville that ride the bus with the Jack Pass, so we do have some, what do you want to say, fixed riders. There's a group there that's going to ride if it came around more often. And so I certainly would be willing to work with Sonoma or whoever to figure that out. And, you know, the biggest thing for us in Arcata is we spend all our TDA, so does Eureka, so we don't have any money outside of pulling it out of our general fund. But if we can get money from the county to run the McKinleyville routes, as not a terrible addition. You're not coming from Fortuna to do it. We're just right there. So it seems like a simple solution. It's probably not that simple, but
That's
anyways,
usually the case.
Something to think about.
And I'll say that's how the Eureka transit system works. The bus goes to Cutton outside of the city limits, and the county pays a portion of that annual budget.
So I would just make the comment also that the unmet transit needs process is advertised on social media, and the comment deadline to be considered in this report of findings is November 15th. So this is part of the whole process. Yes, please.
Yes, one final
Please.
comment, and thanks for everybody's comments today. They'll all be logged and looked at through the committee and the unmet needs process. To respond to the lack of bike routes on the return trips, that was looked at in the last year's unmet needs cycle thoroughly and discussed at the committee, and it was ultimately determined to be operational and not an unmet need. Good news, however, the HTA has programmed funding to install additional bike straps inside of their buses, and that will be implemented soon to come.
Great. Thank you, Philip. Any further comment? Yes.
I guess on that
Director
question,
Akers?
what about a bike trailer on a bus? Is that possible?
A bike trailer, how large, do you know approximate dimensions? I know that there's a limitation in terms of the amount of bikes you can even put on the front or back of a bus due to turnout concerns.
Sure.
And the limitations are pretty great there, as well as with visibility on the front and the back of the vehicle. But I have not heard of these bike trailers. I would love to hear more.
You know, for when you have tour groups, they oftentimes have a vehicle that has a trailer carrying the bikes. And I was just thinking this might be something to look at
Oh.
if there's, for certain routes during certain times of the day, you could add additional bike carrying capacity on certain buses, just by hitching it on. It was a
Thank
thought,
you.
Just a thought.
I will share that information with the operators, and we'll look at it from an operational perspective.
I have one more question. In general, is HCOG and happy with the amount of public input that it gets when looking at the unmet needs? There's nobody here today, but we have a few comments. We had nobody speaking at the Ferndale City Council meeting last night. And I know it's on social media, but I'm not sure how broadly people are aware that the opportunity is there. And I'm just wondering whether or not you feel that we're getting sufficient input from the public to look at unmet needs, or could it be a more robust way to let people know that that opportunity is out there?
Yeah, in looking at past reports, we have at least probably 2 pages, or at least a page and a half of comments listed. So they do come in, but we're always looking for ways to expand. And if you have any suggestions, we certainly can. And just to remind everyone, the law says you have to have 1 public hearing, and we have expanded it to 11. If there is a community, if there's a community regular meeting somewhere, we can certainly add that to lists, potentially in Southern Humboldt. I hear that might be forming. So.
Yeah, Marcella and I talked about the fact that Southern Humboldt is looking at the creation of a municipal advisory committee. So it'd be similar to the situation in McKinleyville, where you'd have an opportunity to talk about these kind of things. I do think that we, as planners and legislators and everything else, may sometimes be more aware of these needs than just the general public, or people will often bring things up that are really, that don't classify under this. So maybe there's another way to educate, but I just do remember years ago going to unmet transit needs meetings, and there seemed to be more people there. And I honestly, I have to say, HGA is doing a very good job of addressing what is brought to them, you know. It's just that we're moving forward and we have more asks. For the benefit of our one audience member, I'll just note that we also discussed earlier the potential for free bus rides in Humboldt County, so that's something we're looking at too. So we're just kind of expanding out, but doing a good job, and it is sometimes very thankless, because you do all you can in the whole wide world to meet the needs of a few people who are very vocal, and then if they may or may not use the service and nobody else does. So it's difficult, but I think we should keep on trying to meet those needs. So I think that for purposes of this meeting, basically our action is to receive the report. Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, both Marcella and Philip. And so let's go on now to the consent calendar. I did mention again prior to the meeting that I'd like to pull item 6A from the consent calendar, and then I don't know, does anybody else want to pull anything else out of there? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion for 6B. I have a motion.
Second the motion, Dean Glauser, Fortuna.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. And just going back briefly to 6A, and this is not for any kind of anything except that I do want to express, first of all, gratitude, appreciation to Marcella and whoever else put this together for including the SAFE program and calling out the fact that we are going to look at the potential for using callback boxes on the non-primary roads in the area. You mentioned 36 and 199, I think, but also we could potentially look at rural roads, and I think you think that's something that's feasible, Marcella?
I believe that other regions in the state do that. The SAFE funds are local funds, so we don't have the feds or any state agencies overseeing it. So it is at the discretion of this board. The law, it doesn't explicitly say you can use it on other roads, but I know that there are examples of this in the state. So we will look at that. And I have been working on the RFP, and I am going to take it home this weekend, so make sure it gets out next week.
Thank you, Marcella. And so if we were to move forward with that, I know that there are some who would like to address it in the public. Can you give me an idea of when we might take up public comment on an item like that?
Well, it's up to this board. I can hold off on circulating the RFP to have you all look at it, and I will let you know it's probably 60 or 70 pages. It's very detailed. The funny thing about that, there's only about 2 entities in the state that run CalBox programs. So you have to do a lot of work for 2 responses. But so that is an option. Another alternative could be the selection committee. It could be representatives of the board or someone that you appoint that will look at the proposals that we receive. And then have an involvement that way.
Okay, great.
Before we enter into a contract. I can bring that back to this board, certainly when the contract's up.
Okay.
But if this board would like representatives on the review committee, that's certainly something we can do.
Okay. What kind of time commitment is that?
Well, like I said, there's only about 2 entities in the state that actually run call boxes. So I would say, to review a proposal, give a couple hours for each. And then usually we work with our technical advisory committee or our transit operators, depending on the RFP. We do have a meeting to discuss the scores and come up with an understanding of why someone scored someone high and low, and then those results are brought to this board for the final decision.
Have you done that in the past, or just?
We do that with every RFP.
so
The
let's
SAFE, I don't know if we've ever had a SAFE RFP that has gone out. We've been working with the same entity for at least 10 years, if not longer.
Anyone interested in serving in that regard? Well, I'll do it.
Okay, wonderful. I have contact of a citizen on Highway 36 as well as 96. And the Yurok tribe is interested in getting something out in Bald Hills Road. So we would like to invite them as well.
Yeah, and so could I invite somebody then?
Absolutely,
Oh, great.
yes.
Well, who I have in mind, I'll just tell you
Okay.
flat out, is Cheryl Anthony. She's with the Resort Improvement District Fire Department,
Okay,
and she has been a very, 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 very vocal proponent of call boxes in areas where we do not have cell coverage.
okay.
In the outlying areas. And I know that when we talked about this in the past, one of the issues we thought of was could we get a mapping of where there is and is not cell coverage, but at least
That is in the scope of work that we're asking for.
Perfect, okay. Just drilling down. Anybody?
Looking for motion or question?
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'll entertain a motion.
Well, then I will move that we accept item A in the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None, passed unanimously. Thank you for, entertaining my soapbox. Appreciate it.
You've been advocating for it. You deserve to talk.
Appreciate it. So that will bring us to item number 8, and this is reconvening as the HCOG board. Anyone like to give me a motion on that?
I move reconvene the HCOG board.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. We're now acting as the HCOG board, and go on to the next item, which is 8A, a contract extension with the city of Eureka for supplemental patrols on the Eureka-Arcata 101 safety corridor.
So it has been a year since this HCOG has contracted with the Eureka Police Department for the supplemental patrols on 101. Our contract does allow for an addendum. I have spoken with our representative from the Eureka Police Department. They are absolutely willing to continue the work. They Sergeant Whitmer did say they probably can't do more than they've done, but they can do, pretty much the same as the last year. My staff has also talked to the city of Eureka, and I believe it's on the November 5th agenda for an agreement for the addendum. And we're hoping that the board will make a motion to continue this important contract.
You want me to do it?
I think, yeah.
That's not a conflict?
What if you have a member that wants to make a comment?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Why? Traveled 20 miles for this. I think it's a wonderful gesture on part of the Eureka Police Department to allow some of their officers to do this. But as I've said before, I don't think it was ever followed through on. Staying superficially close to Eureka, which I'm saying Jacobs Avenue, is not doing any good. If you want to catch the people that are abusing the system, you have to extend yourself out. Get to the Indianola intersection, Harper's, the Redwood lumber that used to be on the bay side. Put yourself someplace in the middle. Otherwise, the people already know that you're there. They're going to slow down, and there's no contact by a Eureka officer in the meantime, so they're going to speed. It does nothing. So if there's any kind of follow-through, have them receptive to the idea that they go out into the middle. Otherwise, it's a foolish gesture. It's a waste of time.
And I will say that they do not only stay at Jacobs. They are throughout the corridor. They don't plant themselves there.
Yeah,
And I did talk to him, and he
Yeah,
said that
it's-
the officers.
It
are
seems,
through it.
I drive the speed limit, actually sometimes under. And it just annoys the living daylights out of me to see people aggressively going 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour on a daily basis when I do drive. So the financial impact has not been successful. Slowing the speed limit down has not been successful. The CHP can only do so many tickets. If you want to impact people's behavior pattern, which is always the same for any of our cities, is that you take money out of their pocket because they broke the law. You catch them, you take the money, and they change their behavior pattern, and word of mouth gets out there. Otherwise, it's a foolish follow-through. So there's my input, and I'd love to see some success and actually some statistics of how many citations have been given on a monthly basis for follow-through for the members.
Yeah, and I will say, and all the board members know this, that there is a monthly report that we do include. This last month, the officers were working on a safety grant that was finalizing. So all of their time was dedicated to that. But every month, we have statistics of how many people were pulled over. We have the biggest loser of the month. They tell us what city they're from, how old they were, and how fast they were going. They have multiple arrests outside of speeding. So the officers let us know
Right,
if
you get
other
to
things.
benefit from outstanding warrants. And
Yes.
amazing as it is, folks, you get to find some people that have had a warrant out for 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden, wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah. And one thing we can do is send you those past reports that are part of our packet.
And we get those because with the contract that we have, that's because they're on the job because of this contract, and we are getting those results.
Yeah, Estelle, I just wanted to say, in response to Dean, is that for me, having Eureka patrol that corridor, because I'm on it all the time, I see them up by Arcata. They don't park up there. They generally, if they're parking down by Jacob. But the statistic report, to me, is fantastic. I wish CHP gave us that same report. They give us a report, we had contact, but it's not detailed like Eureka's. And I'm impressed with Eureka. I wish CHP was up at Eureka level in their reporting, and then we'd know what are we actually getting for that state money. But I'm impressed with it, and it's so impressed in my mind that when I drive through that corridor, I'm always looking, is it CHP or Eureka? And it's almost always Eureka.
So if it's the CHP, you will not become a statistic, is that right?
Anyway, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Director Glaser. Yes, Philip.
Yes, I just wanted to let you know, Paul, that CHP is working on improving and updating their reporting system to make it to help deliver reports similar to the City of Eureka Police Departments.
That'll be great. And to your point, Director Glaser, they are very interesting. They really are interesting reports. You can kind of read through it and see just what kind of an impact they're having. I mean, you can't fix stupid, but
Is there a way of actually putting it on some of the social media, like Lost Coast or Black Belt or North Coast Journal?
Yeah, we can
Those-
certainly.
The more
do
the
that.
people know that actually something is being done and is successful, because I fall into this pitfall. I've never seen any statistics. So
Yeah.
if I'm just a little tip of the iceberg, a lot of people would love to know that, hey, there is something happening.
Yeah, we did put out a joint press release when the contract started. We can do that at this renewal again. And then I can also just see if anyone wants to run a story.
Well, I mean, I always make a report to my city council in Blue Lake, and this is one of the things they're always interested in. So I always give them the details and the biggest losers and things like that, because they're really, really interested in that. And people are seeing it. I think this has been one of the most successful programs that we've started. I'm really impressed by Eureka PD and Gary Whitmer, and I would say that in saying that I would ask that the HCOG board, or make a motion that the HCOG board, acting in its capacity as the service authority for freeway emergencies, adopts Resolution 19-24, authorizing the execution of a contract extension between HCOG and the City of Eureka to continue supplemental patrols on the Eureka-Arcata Highway 101 safety corridor.
Second.
so we have a motion and a second. Any?
I just want to say on behalf of Eureka, I'm so proud of our department. Thank you. Thank you for all your nice words. I will pass them on.
Yeah, please. Yeah, absolutely.
We just post in publications like the North Coast Journal, the stats.
We can certainly look at that. There's a cost related to that, so if that's something that the board wants us to look into in terms of an estimated cost.
It's pretty
Can't you
quick,
use it-
80 for if you wanted to just share it. Lost Coast Outpost might want to just post it.
That's what I would think. The Lost
Yeah.
Coast Outpost,
And
they
Red-Headed
do the
Black Belt.
CHP reports anyway.
Why can't you just have it as a public services announcement? Those are free.
Well, like I said, we did that when the contract began, and we will do it again with this renewal. But that was a year ago, and so maybe, I don't know if once a year is enough, but.
Or just have a PDF that anybody could just cut on and paste onto it and then pull it up on their own.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea. Just give it to Lost Coast. I bet you they would take it. Every year, every month when we get the report, just pass it on to them. And we can even do it
They'll
after.
totally love the Biggest Loser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, after every meeting, so, we get to see it first.
There we go.
Yeah, it's unfortunate there's not a report this month, but I can certainly send the previous 11 months, and then.
That sounds good. We could even say as part of the press release doing it that this is our plan for the future, so tune in to whoever wants to put it out there. Great. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Eureka and HCOG. And so now we go to our PAC member reports. First, we'll hear from Kevin from Caltrans. Thank you for your patience.
Just a quick update on Last Chance Grade. The work continues on the environmental phase. The next big component is getting a consultant on board to do the bulk of the work for the environmental phase. So they're working on that right now. That's my update.
Thank you.
And
HG?
Estelle, I was gone last month, so I don't really have anything to report outside of our RTS, all-electric bus, is running and doing well between CR and HSU. So it runs in the morning between CR and HSU, goes back, charges, then goes in the afternoon, that same loop. And, you know, it's very successful compared to other transitions we've made. So we're happy.
Did it survive okay on Wednesday?
I don't know about that.
You weren't around
There's no
town.
power to charge. It needs like 4 hours to charge up fully. So.
Well, I'm sure your city, as well as all the other entities, have nice big mamma jamma generators to be able to do what they need to do, and that would be on the top priority list as well, so.
Yeah, hopefully, if things progress in Arcata with some development that's going on, we'll be getting, AMRTS will be getting their own electric bus and charging stations. So once we have a few of those charging stations, then the electric bus can move throughout the county without concern about needing to be towed back. So.
Great, moving forward. Thank you. All right, so we basically have discussed the Arcata Safety Corridor, and Marcella?
I do have an update on our, the 101 corridor improvement project.
Oh, okay, good.
So October 8th was the North hearing for the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program, the ITIP. And as you're aware, the state has program, or drafted the program for $20.7 additional dollars for our project. So that was wonderful to hear. It was, I was a little nervous when I got to the hearing because the governor did delete some projects from Central Valley. So he is looking at increasing funding for rail and transportation and mass transportation. And in order to, he has a $60 million amount, the threshold that he's holding for a big project to get people out of their cars and onto public transportation. So I was very nervous when those other jurisdictions had funds that were already programmed 2 years ago stripped from them. So that was most of the comments. I did speak and speak to the importance of this project, and I didn't get any frowns. So I am hoping in December that our project will remain fully funded.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marcella.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Yes, Director Avis.
I have a question on that. I guess at the state level, is there a recognition or anticipation of people migrating, becoming climate refugees from the Central Valley to the coastal areas and the extra transportation needs that may arise as a result of that?
I have not heard it on a state level. I've certainly spoken to other coastal executive directors, and they didn't seem to be too concerned with it. I'm not sure if they're just not looking forward thinking or if there's not enough information yet,
Okay.
but
Thank you.
I can see that happening.
All right, I believe we can adjourn. And thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.